Good morning. I think I'm live. And I think you're all live too. So I see all these comments in the box. So perhaps there's a lot. Perhaps someone can just tell me if they can actually see me and hear me. Otherwise, I'm sitting in this room talking to myself. Haven't done one of these live sessions before, so it's a bit of a experiment. Yes, okay, got some yeses. So is the voice sound okay? All eyes and ears. Wow. Okay, that's terrific. I'm just going to, not wanting to be rude or anything, I'm just going to turn the chat stuff off, if you don't mind, because I'm really a party pooper, because it really distracts me, and I think it distracts everybody else. So in a second, I'm going to click a thing and you're all going to be silenced. Sorry about that. Okay. Bang. No chatting. So, welcome everybody. The chat thing perhaps put on towards when we have the Q&A and maybe towards the end. But for me, it's like splits my attention big time. So anyway, here we are for this live session. And I'm Samaneri Jayasara. I assume most of you who are here perhaps have some awareness of that. And I just want to start out what we do in Australia traditionally is when we have a meeting or a gathering that's kind of in a public space, is we acknowledge the traditional owners of the country. You might do that in your own countries too, I'm not sure. So the traditional custodians of this land on which I'm sitting are the Gundungurra and Tarawal people. And I just want to pay my respects to the people who've traditionally cared for this land. And it's very powerful land here. It's very beautiful land. And it's been through its own trauma lately, as you probably all know, with the bushfires. So, and that has its own story. That's a story in itself in terms of the Aboriginal connection to that phenomena. The other thing I'd like to start to, which is traditionally for my Buddhist tradition, is to pay homage to the Buddha, to all the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, to all enlightened masters of the past, present, and future, and to ask for their blessings and support for this gathering, this meeting, and may it be a wholesome gathering and of benefit to all sentient beings. So welcome. And if it's morning, good morning. And I'm thinking some parts of the world it's probably late evening. I'm not sure. We're all over the place, which is interesting. Perhaps by way of introduction, because there were a few questions about my appearance in this tradition, these robes. For those of you who aren't aware, it's from the Theravadan forest tradition. So within Buddhism, there are many different traditions. And the Theravadan tradition is considered the sort of the school of the elders. It refers to the Pali Canon. And the lineage teachers that I'm mostly connected with, you might be aware, is Ajahn Chah. I posted a fantastic talk of his well, it wasn't a talk actually. It was a compilation of pointers a couple of days ago. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, there's some really direct pointers. And he was a brilliant teacher from Thailand. And his main Western disciple is Ajahn Sumedho, Longpo Sumedho, who I'm going to do a reading from today. And he's still alive. So he's one of the few live masters that I read. And also within this lineage, a lot of you might be aware of Ajahn Brahm, who does a lot of talks and retreats, but there's a lot of stuff of Ajahn Brahm's on YouTube, and more monastics are having to connect with people virtually, given the state of affairs. And also there's a lot of Ajahn Sumedho on YouTube too. He's still giving some live talks, which is wonderful. So, and just in response to, I suppose, that question about, because one of the questions asked in the post was, why do I identify as a Buddhist nun? And I suppose from an early age, in my teens, I was drawn inexplicably to the teachings of the Buddha, probably as a way to answer a lot of questions that weren't being answered, and the existential questions of suffering, which Buddhism really, doesn't pussyfoot about with. It goes straight to the core of, there is suffering. There is a cause of suffering. However, the good news is there's a path leading out from the end of suffering, and there is the end of suffering. So the Four Noble Truths from a very early age really spoke to me, as did the Eightfold Noble Path and those core, I guess you'd call them basic Buddhist teachings. And I have no idea why, but just was drawn into both the understanding, the philosophical framework, as well as the practice of meditation, because meditation was, or panya, is the path leading one out of suffering. So it's a very practical teaching. It's quite scientific, really, when you think of it. And that appealed to my particular conditioned mind frame, as I think it does to a lot of Westerners. So, and then for some reason was drawn into monasticism. And there's a whole story around that. But anyway, this question, I suppose, I reflected on, of why do I identify as a Buddhist nun? I don't really identify as a Buddhist nun. I mean, I don't really wake up in the morning and go, oh, I'm a Buddhist nun. And I don't really wake up in the morning also and go, I'm a woman or I'm a man. So this question of what we identify with, it's when we really reflect on it, identification takes a lot of work. It takes our thinking mind to start to put together an identity. And so in terms of being a Buddhist nun, I don't really have this concept of myself as a Buddhist nun, except when people remind me. I suppose looking at myself now, it's a reminder when I can't see myself. And so it's only when people remind me that I'm a Buddhist nun. And I share with you kind of a funny story that happened last week, because we went into town, which is a fairly rare occurrence, to get some keys cut. And while I was sitting down waiting for my sister to get the keys, this old man, and this is a fairly affluent white town nearby, this old man stood, pretty close in front of me, no social distancing. And he just kind of looked like this, up and down. I thought, what is that? And I'm like, what's he looking at? I was like, oh, that's right. I'm a Buddhist nun. That's right. I'm a freak. I forgot. And then to the right, I saw an older woman also just standing there going, what is that? Is it a man? Is it a woman? And if it's a woman, why has she shaved her head? And so it brought me back. Oh, that's right. I'm a Buddhist nun and I'm odd. So I just smiled and remembered that that's the persona, that's the form that I'm currently walking around in, and smiled at them and they, off they went. Something to think about. Anyway, so maybe we'll get to talk in addressing some of the questions that were presented about this whole notion of identity, which is the core root of suffering, really. And I think this talk tonight, the reading tonight, addresses that principle quite directly. So the schedule, if you can call it a schedule, that I proposed was we'll spend maybe 15 minutes sitting in meditation, a guided meditation, as a way of, just settling everything and settling all those thoughts, ideas, expectations, projections that we might have towards what's happening, towards me, towards yourself, all those identifications. And then I'll address some of the questions that have been proposed, and then do a reading. So I don't know, I thought maybe it might take an hour or so. So feel free to come and go. I won't know what's going on out there. So anyway, I'll shut up now and let's just do some quiet sitting. So how about we all just take a breath in? And hopefully you're all in places where you are relatively undisturbed and there's some quietude. Here it's just after 4:30 in the morning and it's a lovely time to be awake. And if you can sit comfortably wherever you are in your room, and whatever practice you do in terms of eyes open or closed, whatever. But if you can, just bring your awareness into the moment right now, and to allow everything to arise within that awareness. So often it's good just to notice that there's a bodily form here. Feeling the weight of your body wherever you are sitting, and bringing awareness to the fact that it says sensations, heaviness, conscious awareness of the earth element can really help us ground in this moment and pull us away from being lost in our heads and our thoughts. So I often find it's good to just gently take my attention to the soles of my feet. And feeling whatever sensations are there right now, the tingling, the warmth, or the cool. And when we do this, it's a nice feeling of just being centered. And the whole of the body you can just feel from the top of your head down to the toes of your feet, if you can do that. But whatever you can do just for a moment to be fully present, fully embodied and grounded. And dropping all the notions that you might have about what the body is or what the body isn't, or am I the body or am I not the body, or just forget it. Just be in your body. Because that's where we've found ourselves in this waking state. Waking up, we know that we are, that we exist, and we find that within this awareness, there's a physical form. How did we get here? No idea, but don't worry about it. There's life right now. And within this awareness, you can also notice the play of thoughts, images, ideas, judgments, perceptions. And like the bodily sensations that you notice from time to time, just allow these to come and go too, without pushing or pulling, without accepting or rejecting. They're simply clouds in the sky. And between each thought, you might be able to notice that there's a space, there's a gap. And without forcing or making an effort, just gently notice the gaps, the space. And then we might notice another thought arise, an image or a pain in the body. It's all allowed. There's no problem. A good thought, a bad thought, a happy thought, a sad thought, a critical thought, anything. Everything's welcome. But nothing's more important than anything else. We just see that everything's arising and ceasing. And we don't have to make anything end. It'll end naturally by itself. Simply by bringing your attention to it. If it's something unpleasant, something you prefer not to be there, just bring your complete attention to it without judging, without holding or pushing anything, and see what happens. This stuff is so insubstantial and fleeting that we don't have to get into conflict with any of it. We simply remain open, welcoming, bringing the attention fully so that we start to realize that whatever arises within the space of this awareness, your own awareness. And awareness doesn't have an opinion. Awareness just simply notices quietly. So can you begin to be aware of the awareness? That within you which just simply knows. The Buddha, the one who knows. And whatever perceptions or concepts might jump up in relationship to that word as well, to that idea, you just know that also is a thought. And let it go. So it's a process of just constantly relaxing, releasing any clinging, any holding to anything. So things are just flowing, phenomena is just naturally flowing inside and outside. But we start to recognize its fleeting nature, its impermanent nature, and its insubstantial nature, its emptiness, its not self nature. Which of these thoughts are me? They're all gone now. Which of those feelings, perceptions are me? They're all gone too. So there's a new process, a new aliveness each moment. And the suffering happens when we cling, when we identify any of these phenomena internally, externally, as me or mine. Even the good stuff, the stuff that says I'm a wonderful person, just drop that too. Just be empty, empty of any ideas about yourself, empty of any ideas about others, empty of any ideas about the world in this waking state. And that doesn't mean you should be sitting there as a blank slate. You're not trying to get rid of all these thoughts or get rid of these feelings. Just be natural. Just let them come. We're not controlling anything. There's no one here to control. So we just see the play. It's play and display. You might also enjoy noticing silence. If you're in a quiet place right now, and even if you're not, you can still notice silence between sounds or noise. So if you allow your awareness to be expansive rather than fixated inwardly, when the awareness expands, you can feel, you can notice the silence both within and so-called without. And feeling a sense of boundlessness. Where all the borders dissolve, when thoughts are just allowed to dissolve naturally, when we're less contracted as a person. We start to notice that ultimately there's no boundaries. So that who or what I'm talking to now is really no different from the space of awareness in which I experience from this personal consciousness this sense of empty cognizance, or this naked awareness, which is simply our natural state. So at the deepest level, what's happening for me and what's happening for you is not different. So I hope that that all worked. I'll check in with you later. It worked in terms of the technical, not in terms of the metaphysical, but I hope that the microphone's still working and still got a connection. We have a fairly spasmodic internet connection here, so it's always a risk doing something live. Anyway, it's lovely to sit in silence with you all out there in cyberspace. It's interesting, isn't it? Cyberspace as well as the space of awareness in which these connections happen quite spontaneously and effortlessly. So the plan now was to answer some questions. So I'll stick to the plan. Okay. I have to put my glasses on. So I'm just going to answer these spontaneously. I haven't planned anything. I don't like planning. Well, unless I have to. But in terms of Dharma, it's better that it comes from a more spontaneous place in the heart. What I did do was notice some of the consistent themes. So how about I just address these questions, and depending on how long I go on, hopefully I won't go on too long, we might pop the chat thing up to get some live questions. But anyway, there were some good questions here, and the first three I grouped together seem to have a consistent theme, which were, how can we make meditation a day-long or a continuous process, maintaining awareness during activities? And how can we deepen and stabilize this this is the second question, but it's related, obviously, stabilize our daily post-meditation routines and experiences? Because sometimes the mundane events that happen after we sit in practice, I suppose like formal practice, interfere in one's stream of being. And the third question, again, which is related, is how do we notice or how do we deal with the periodical waves of emotions, whether joy or sadness? So this person's saying they find it hard, and I think the three people are saying they find it hard that it's okay when we sit in meditation, it's all very lovely, but then when we have to go out into the world and deal with people, it's a challenge and we lose. Perhaps they're saying that this is the subtext here. How do you not lose mindfulness or awareness? So you can't lose awareness. Awareness is always there. By, I guess, the thought veils it. The thought, the perceptions veil the underlying, unchanging reality. And I suppose when we sit in meditation, not always, but often, we start to really feel the ground of being, our sense of beingness, and we like it. It's peaceful. When the thoughts slow down or, really peter out, when we start to disappear as a person, whew, what a relief. However, we get up from our cushion and we get reminded by the world and everybody else that we're a person or a Buddhist nun. So, and we don't like a lot of those perceptions that we engage with. Some of them we do. So I guess these questions are kind of reflecting a sense of wanting to hold on to peace and awareness. And it's also, I guess, a pitfall. Someone asked about one of the pitfalls too. This question's coming in now. So that the pitfall is to attach to stillness and samadhi at the deepest levels too. And then we don't want to engage. We don't want to have life and post-meditation because it's tough. So first we have to see this attachment. And it's not to say that peace and stillness isn't a lovely thing, but obviously our challenge as human beings is to integrate our awareness and our capacity to be imperturbable in the midst of things happening. So one way to do this is just to, firstly, I suppose, acknowledge the attachment there. We'd like to just be still. We'd like to keep this peace. And don't even believe that. Just don't. It's about moving away from preferences, isn't it? So we go out into the world and we get a bit throttled. We get thrust around by the winds of people, energy, news, everything. But, this is where practice can really deepen. So if we change our attitude a little bit to willingness to engage and noticing liking and disliking. I don't like it when these particular emotions come up. I'd prefer to feel peace and stillness. But the practice that, these teachings that you're listening to or pointing to is helping us understand, to unravel the delusion in all of that. That firstly, the belief that we are our emotions, because we're not. Emotions are just emotions. So it's moving away from identifying with any of them, even the stuff we like. And we like to identify with the good stuff. We believe that, yeah, that's me. I'm a great person. I'm very competent. Give me that feedback. But as soon as we get the other stuff, or we feel within ourselves the unpleasantness, we want to get rid of it. We want to push it away. So post-meditation can often be the most powerful time for developing the practice, And by the practice, I mean staying centered and aware and constantly shedding these beliefs and these veils about me as a person, me as an emotion, me as a story that people project or I project onto myself. So it's a lot of work post-meditation, but it's good work. It's where a lot of good work comes from. And someone asked in that third question too about that process in living in monastic community. And I'm here to tell you, brothers and sisters, monastic community is tough. Not in the way that you perhaps think it might be. The tough stuff is the community living. It's living up against people who you wouldn't choose to live with. And it's like diamonds, rough diamonds, rubbing up against each other. And, obviously people who take the robes, a lot of us want to think of ourselves as lovely spiritual people who just think lovely thoughts all the time. And we're compassionate and all the time. And it's not. We live with people who we can't stand. And then we have to look at, whoa, this perception that arises or this thought. And you think, well, that's not very spiritual. So there's all sorts of ways that people can deal with that in spiritual communities. If those of you who've lived in spiritual community, not just monastic communities, and it can get really weird and a lot of shadow stuff can get buried because we're spiritual and we love each other. We love everybody. And that's a lot of nonsense because we have to look honestly at the defilements, as they're called, greed, hatred, and delusion, and be willing to look, but not in a stupid way, not in a way that says, oh, I'm an evil person, I've got bad thoughts, I'm not very spiritual, but to be willing to look. This is part of the human condition. It's part of taking birth in samsara. And so we accept it. We completely open to it. And if we can shift our attitude to, wow, that's really good to see this stuff emerge, because in seeing it with wisdom, we're clearing out. We're clearing out our karma. We're clearing out our delusion. We're clearing out the nonsense story that we tell ourselves and becoming honest about what's really emerging in the heart. But we don't own it. There's no one there to say that I'm an evil person or I'm a beautiful person. There's just stuff arising. And we know it. And we take refuge in the awareness. Or in this tradition, we take refuge in the Buddha, and not the Buddha who lived 2,500 years ago, or the statue on the shrine. We take refuge in the Buddha within our hearts that knows, that is still and aware. And it doesn't change, and it doesn't have an opinion, and it's not affected by good thoughts or bad thoughts, evil or good. So go into the world with that as your refuge, and it doesn't matter if you feel crappy when you're around people. Just feel crappy, but you're not feeling crappy, you're just aware of it. So bring awareness to the good and the bad and the ugly, and have that as, I suppose, a commitment. There are practical things you can do too, though, to help that. And, in your life, simplify your life. Engage in wholesome things. So if you're doing stuff that's kind of making it very difficult to have good mindfulness and awareness, like drinking yourself into a stupor or taking drugs that, give you a nice trip for a while, but it just does your head in, that's going to make it really hard to be balanced and integrated. And similarly with other actions. So in the preliminary practices within Buddhism is to think about having a basis in sila or morality. And that's not to be moralistic, but it's to say that these practice guidelines give us a grounding and a support. That's why the Buddha encouraged lay people to keep the 5 precepts. 5 precepts are to refrain from killing any living being, to refrain from stealing, to refrain from lying or harsh words and backbiting, to refrain from sexual misconduct or, rape and things like that, and to refrain from knocking ourselves out completely with drugs and alcohol, which is the cause of heedlessness, really. Because if we engage willingly and stupidly in not living a wholesome life, it makes it hard it makes it impossible in some ways, but it makes it hard to maintain steadiness because we're dealing with all the guilt, all the toxicity, all the karmic repercussions. There are practical preliminary practices before we get to the point of saying, well, there's no such thing as virtue or vice. It's all just emptiness. It sounds nice, but it's not the experience for most of us. We have to accept that we live in the relative world and we're still dealing with causes and effects. Okay, so hopefully that has answered people's questions in relation to how to strengthen our awareness and stability post-meditation. The other question was asking whether the mind will relax back into silence if we accept the chatter once we notice it. And this person says, I believe more and more I, as a separate self, can only help by my attitude to what is happening, by allowing it, not by doing something. But I still think I have this sense I need to try to do something. Yes, that's the dilemma, isn't it? The effortless effort, the doing without doing, the action without action. But you're right, if you do just allow, but that allowing has to be with full mindfulness, with full awareness. So the attention comes into the moment when thoughts are dragging you away or some reaction is occurring. But you say that sometimes you have this sense that you need to try to do something. Yeah, to just notice that. So as soon as you notice, oh, look, I'm trying to control the situation. I'm trying to get rid of this. I'm trying to make it better. I'm trying to be aware. I'm trying to be mindful. Just notice, oh, yeah, I'm trying. This is the trying mind. It's just like this. And in noticing, like you said at the beginning, actually, you've answered your own question. In noticing anything with full wisdom and awareness, it just drops away. So then you don't have to do anything. That's the whole point, isn't it? Two people asked about how they could or should they encourage or suggest that their friends meditate if we feel it could be a benefit to them without sounding like we're imposing. And the other person, separate person but a similar question, said, how can we assist our fellow Christians in accessing the gold in our own mystic tradition, and therefore stem the flow of probably a lot of Westerners who head towards the Eastern religions. I think with both of those responses, and I've learnt this the hard way, don't worry about other people. Don't try and change others. It always backfires. When I first started out as a fundamentalist Vipassana meditator, I thought everybody had to do it, and those that didn't were deluded and lost. And, we all get fundamentalist about our religions or our spirituality at some point. We have to look at that. It's a real bore, and people who do that are real bores, myself included when I did it. Hang on, my computer's doing something. That's it. So I would suggest the best thing, this is coming from my own experience, is to don't, if they ask, obviously you can share about your practice, but the best teaching is modeling. As we know, people who've got kids probably have learnt that. It's not what you say, it's what you do that the kids pick up. So if you live a life that's inspiring and honest and true and awake, people will notice and be inspired, and they'll find their own way. But I think as soon as we think we have to change others, we're deluded in so many ways. Well, one, we're creating this separation between self and other. And again, believing in this person, creating this person who's not right, who I have to fix, or a religion that's not right and I have to fix. I wouldn't worry. The path is just practice and be spontaneous in the moment. And if someone is genuinely interested in either your religion or your meditation practice, let them ask, but I wouldn't shove anything down anybody's throat. Just be who you are, and that person or group, let them find their way. Okay, I think there might be one question over the page. Someone asked about grief, because again, we come back to these ideals that we have, these teachings we have, that there is no self and there's no other. And ultimately that's true. But it's about, it's great, these high teachings, but if it's not a reality for us, we shouldn't be pretending. Because if someone close to you dies, you'll feel grief. And even an enlightened being may feel grief too. I don't know. And well, it was said in the Buddha, when one of the Buddha's closest disciples died, the Buddha made the statement that doesn't feel the same without him around anymore. And there was a real poignant moment that the Buddha knows that, I don't know if it was Sariputra or someone, terrible nun, aren't I? Anyway, one of his closest disciples. So what was I trying to say? Yeah, so the Buddha knows that Sariputra, if it was Sariputra, there was no Sariputra, but there was an experience of connectedness and beingness, and that person, that being manifested a certain quality, and it was lovely being around that person, and now they're gone. So even the Buddha acknowledged in a very poignant way loss. But the difference would be that he wouldn't believe it ultimately, he wouldn't attach to it, but neither would he deny a natural feeling of grief. So we're human beings in a human realm with human feelings, and it's natural if someone dies to feel grief. And it's, I guess, related to that last question, is we need to allow the grief to come and to feel it without judging it or saying, well, I'm not a very good meditator or an Advaita practitioner or a Buddhist because there's no self. So why am I grieving? Get over it. I mean, that's just kidding ourselves and being, developing a cold-hearted intellectual approach to it. So we grieve, but we grieve with wisdom, because the heart has to release that. But we know this person hasn't really gone anywhere. The body elements have gone back to nature. The stream of consciousness has gone where the stream of consciousness is karmically destined to go. But that person is still, I don't want to call it a person, but I have to use words, is still within your heart. My mum died 10 years ago now. And, you have to, it takes a long time when you lose a parent to kind of process it. And it still often comes up in dreams or visions of the grief's still there. It's like, wow, very deep layers of grief mixed a little bit with guilt, as, with aging parents. But to embrace that with a heart of compassion for oneself. But then to reflect wisely on, okay, well, who was my mum? My mum incarnated in a particular form, a body, but what was it about my mum that was so deeply real, or what I felt most connected with? And when I go to that place, it's there's no mum. There's just no mum in the normal sense of the word. There's just that feeling of silent love, really, unconditional love. And it's hard to put words around that, but perhaps if someone's grieving now, it's always, I think, good to go to a quiet space and really feel into it, and to use the wisdom teachings to reflect on loss and grief, but without coming from here thinking I have to be over it. And trust your heart that this process will heal itself. Okay, and there's one other question about the concept of no self in Buddhism, but I kind of think I've addressed that a little bit already in the meditation and with what I've been saying, so perhaps I don't need to go over that. But it does remind me of a great story that Ajahn Amaro shared in one of his books. Ajahn Amaro's in this tradition, and he was co-abbot of Abhayagiri in California. Now he's the abbot of Amaravati in the UK. But he tells this great story of this Tibetan Rinpoche at a conference or a practice session or retreat. And there was a guy there, fairly dedicated practitioner who's been doing prostrations, pujas, visualizations with Tara. And this Rinpoche was teaching these practices. But the young man said to the Rinpoche, look, I'm really struggling with this concept of Tara. I'm doing the practices, but sometimes you kind of talk about Tara as if she's a real person. Other times you say she's the embodiment of particular Buddha. Other times you talk about her as a skillful means. But I do these practices really seriously and wholeheartedly. If you just tell me that Tara is real, is she real? And apparently the Rinpoche just took a moment and considered the young man's question. And then he looked at him and he said, Tara knows she's not real. I thought it was brilliant. It's really pointing to, we're straddling these two realities. I'm here talking to you, You can see a form. You can put a name to it. Jayasara. That's a new name, you see. So I had to come up with that name. But, you know, there's no one here. But we don't deny the appearance of things. So these things appear apparent without truly existing in the deluded way that we often think of it, as a fixed, permanent, unchanging person. So the concept of no self in Theravada Buddhism is often referred to as anatta. And in the Tibetan practices, you mostly relate to that in terms of emptiness. But it's my form is empty, but the emptiness is also form. So we don't push away and deny what we see or hate it. You know, people can get into these trips of, I'm not the body, I'm not the person, therefore I have to deny it and hate it and get rid of it. It's like, no. When we say deny it, it's denying it with wisdom. It's not being fooled by it or the illusion of Maya. Oh, that's the cat, if you heard that. She's going to scream for a minute. But is there a cat? Hopefully she'll go to bed. Okay, so let's gone on a bit, haven't I? It's 5:30. But anyway, you're welcome to stay or go if you've got other plans. I was thinking the reading will probably take about 30 minutes or so, depending on how fast I read it. But I was thinking it might be nice just to allow 10 minutes to have some live chat, as long as it doesn't get too manic, out of control in terms of me being able to read it. Anyway, let's go and see if I can put it on. Live chat. I have to put on the slow mode. All right, so the chat's back on. Maybe just 10 minutes if people have got spontaneous questions. The last thing I see on the chat is love from Eddie Poe Ray. Isn't that nice? So Rez has asked, is non-duality and true Buddhism essentially the same practice? Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's all pointing to the same thing. Hence, you know, if you listen to any of the teachings, they're all pointing to the same non-dual reality that is what the practice is all about, to realize that the lack of self and other, or the three characteristics of existence. Well, there's a lot of questions. I knew it would get like this. Kevin, realize the emptiness of the illusory external perception too. The air, the world, the people inside and outside are both empty. Now everything is truly free or meditate. Yeah, nice. You are the universe. Praying versus meditation. Good morning all. I'm not getting many questions. Can you speak on spiritual bypassing? No, I'm going to bypass that one. No. What is spiritual bypassing? Oh, I think it's kind of what I just said, that we'll go, yeah, the body, I'm not the body, and nothing is real. It's all empty. Therefore, I can do what I like because there's no right and wrong. Ultimately, there's no good or bad, and I don't have to deal with any of this stuff. I think that's spiritual bypassing. At least it is in my understanding. And it's a pitfall, isn't it, to just kind of hold on to concepts of emptiness and non-self intellectually. These teachings are all pointing to us to help us realize it. So realization is not the same as thinking or getting it intellectually. It's about having the insight. And that insight comes from a very deep place. And often those insights are very difficult to put into words, and not even necessary to put into words, because if they're true insights, things really transform, things drop away. So one of the first three fetters that drop away, and this is from the Theravadan framework, the first three fetters for one to enter the stream of enlightenment, one of these is what's called Sakkaya Ditthi. So the personality view drops away. Because you can say, yeah, there is no person, and then someone calls you something or you hit your toe and the person's still very much there. But when we really see through the delusion of the personality, so realizing anatta, no self, that's one of the first three fetters that drops away. But it has to happen at a profound, deep level. Not just reading it in a book. And then one is considered to be entering the stream of enlightenment. I think there's, wow, too many questions. Nice. I think these are nice, aren't they? But I think I'm going to be completely overwhelmed by all these questions. Maybe we can have an opportunity, if they stay up, I can address them on the later in handwriting on the post, because I think this stuff stays. Okay, but listen, it's 5:38. The birds are starting to wake up out there. So my plan was to do a reading now from one of the masters. So I feel really rude stopping the chat, but I'm going to have to. Sorry. I loves yous all. All right, you chatted off now, I think. So I will get to those questions later, but there's just too many. Sorry for the noise if you've got earphones in. Okay. So let's just come back to letting some of these questions go. So many questions, so many confusions that we have, but all of them can be answered from a space of silence often. But you have to trust that. I don't have all the answers. Far from it. But we all have the answers within ourselves. So I think whatever question or confusion you have, it's okay to ask others, of course, but take it into a quiet space and don't think about it. Just kind of let it settle. And, answers come from the deepest place, the wisest place, but we have to let the waves of the ocean settle down before we can find that. So those of you who'd like to stay on, if you don't want to, this is recorded, so it'll be a reading, a live reading. I'm going to read from Ajahn Sumedho, which I think is appropriate because he is my beloved teacher who is still alive and well. He's about 86 now. I'd love for you to check him out on YouTube. He's been giving some amazing talks from his kuti in Thailand. You can find it on the web, on YouTube thing. Just type in Ajahn Sumedho and you'll see the recent talks. So he was the first Western disciple of Ajahn Chah and brought Buddhism in this form to the West. What an amazing being, and much loved. So I'm going to read from him tonight, and the talks, it's taken from a book called Don't Take Your Life Personally. That's great, isn't it? And the talk is called This is the Deathless. So what I'm going to suggest we do, so you don't have to look at my form and be distracted by it, and have a have a meditation with it is I'm going to put the computer down on the candle, so you can just gaze at the candle without me distracting you. And hopefully you've still got some quietude wherever you are. And you can hear me okay still. Sit quietly, compose the mind, adopt an attitude of relaxed attention, mindfulness, an attitude of letting go, of being at ease, of letting the world disappear. Now, to talk about relaxed attention sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? You might think attention puts you into a state of not being relaxed. And relaxation often means not paying attention. But in this context, these two words, relaxed attention, are pointing to an attitude of being present without trying, without having some preconception of becoming attentive or making yourself meditate, or putting yourself into the usual striving attitude. For most of us, when we think of paying attention, it is usually with a sense of striving, of making ourselves do something as an act of will. Whereas the kind of attention I'm talking about here has nothing to do with willing ourselves to pay attention. It's a natural state of ease, of being present, more like listening, but not controlling. Letting go is another concept that might help us understand this sense of relinquishing rather than holding on to anything. We are allowing ourselves to be present without getting caught up in ideas that we have to get something out of this, that we have to control everything, or even get rid of negative thoughts. All these attitudes are part of our conditioning. We have these tendencies to want to control, to judge, to discriminate, to try to get something we don't have yet, some idealized state, something called enlightenment that we imagine we don't have right now. Or we try to get rid of bad thoughts, greed, hatred, and delusion in order to become this enlightened being in the future. But with the attitude of relaxed attention, we let go of all that. All our concepts, ideas, views about ourselves, about Buddhism, about Dharma, about meditation, about enlightenment, about everything. And there is nothing we have to get or get rid of. What I'm pointing to is simply learning to trust, learning to recognize a very natural state of being rather than coming from some idea, some opinion, some view or assumption, which is the result of a culturally conditioned mind. The thing to keep remembering is that mindfulness is always here and now. It isn't something we have to attain. When we try to conceive of awareness or mindfulness, we create an idea of it, and then we try to achieve it according to that idea. We can grasp the ideas of Dharma very quickly because intellectually we're quite well developed. But this can get in the way of awareness, of an awareness, which is beyond definition. Awareness is more of an attitude, a natural state of being. Yet we can take the word and say, "Oh, I'm not very mindful. I should be mindful," and form views about it. Rather than trying to define awareness or figure out what it is, I suggest you become aware of the present moment and the way you are right now. What is happening? You are sitting. It's as obvious as that. And the posture of sitting is like this. Notice. Just be aware of the experience of sitting. Awareness isn't a critical function. You're not saying, "Oh, I don't sit very well," or I should sit better. If you start thinking like that, well, forget it. Don't create a problem about sitting. Just be with the way it is right now. The experience of your body sitting in this posture. The weight of the body, the hands suddenly coming into consciousness, the right hand touching the left hand. Maybe you become aware of your breathing, inhaling, exhaling at the nostrils, or the movements of the abdomen. I'm not trying to be aware of anything in particular, but just allowing awareness to be. Then that which is present here and now, the way it is allowed into consciousness. The ordinary, everyday experience of the body sitting or breathing is like this. Simply notice these things rather than react to them. You might think, "Oh, it's too hot, it's too cold," and then react. But before you do that, use the opportunity to simply notice feeling hot is like this. Also, be aware of your mental state, your emotional state, or your mood. Not criticizing or trying to define it, but just noticing it. You don't even have to describe it. Simply trust yourself to recognize it, that it's just this way. Awareness is an embracing ability we have. It isn't discriminatory or judgmental, but it's discerning with wisdom. It sees, it knows, and allows even pain or negative mind states to be the way they are. The Buddha's teaching was directed towards recognizing what we have created out of ignorance. We're conditioned to trying to get or get rid of things. Our ability to think and reason, the conditioning of the mind from birth, is dualistic. It functions on this dualistic spectrum of best to worst, good to bad, and right to wrong. We've developed our critical faculties to a high level, so we know what is best and how things should be, and what is right and what is wrong. We can create the highest ideals of conditioned phenomena at their very best. And because of that, we fear their opposites. So we have the concept of heaven and hell. And we say heaven is the best and hell is the worst. But thinking is a dualistic function of the mind. Just contemplate your own thinking. If you have good, then you have bad. We would like everything to be good and get rid of all the bad. But this creates a great division in us because we are always trying to get rid of what we think is bad. That is the dualistic way of operating. The thought processes are like that. Emotionally, ideologically, politically, economically, there's always some kind of struggle and resistance going on, trying to control, trying to get rid of the bad forces, the bad thoughts within us, the anger and greed, the fear and depression. But the Buddha pointed to an awareness which transcends conditioning. So no one is a helpless victim of their fate. It might seem that our lives have been ruined through tragedies, abuses, and misfortunes we have experienced since childhood. It might seem like that on a personal level. But the Buddha pointed to ultimate reality, in which the conditioning of our minds can be resolved. In other words, we have a way out of conditioning. We are not just victims of misfortune. Genuine spiritual practice is about awakening, paying attention to life, being aware, being present here and now. Thinking, on the other hand, is about ideals. But I'm not trying to stop myself thinking. It's not an attack on the intellect. I'm not anti-intellectual. I'm talking about learning to use the intellect in a way that it does not become the dominant delusion from which we operate, like good and bad, right and wrong, praise and blame, happiness and suffering. The personality is created out of praise and blame. The sense of who we are, our self-worth, is associated with rewards and punishments. The punishments and rewards we receive from our parents, society, from relationships with others. But what is natural is consciousness. That is something you don't create. You can create ideals and negative mental states. You can dwell on unfairness, mistreatment, abuse, or on all the wonderful things that have happened. But it all takes thought. We have to remember, and we have to believe in our assumptions and memories. The proliferating tendencies from these memories then create our sense of well-being or misery. Awareness or mindfulness allows us to be aware of whatever we have created. The mood we are in now, the physical realities of this moment, the sensitivity of the body at this present moment, the breathing, and so forth. With awareness, we can embrace the whole of it, the good, the bad, the right, the wrong, the pleasure and pain. They all belong. It isn't a matter of trying to control the mind. It is more like choiceless awareness, in Krishnamurti's words. There is awareness, and we don't choose anything. We don't try to hold on to this or get rid of that. I encourage you to contemplate this. Just notice, it's like this. This isn't difficult. It isn't terribly refined. It doesn't depend on absolute silence and control of the environment. It doesn't depend on absorbing into refined mental states. It isn't jhana or high levels of concentration and samadhi. It's just this. this sense of relaxed attention. I experience it sometimes as listening, but it is a sense of openness, receptivity, and well-being, and it is relaxed. I don't try to do it in terms of, you've got to be more mindful, Samedo. If I start that, then what happens? When I say, you've got to be more mindful, Samedo, I go into a state of tension. That's the inner tyrant again. When that starts, I go tense. So what I'm emphasizing here is a sense of relaxing, opening, expanding, letting go, listening. It isn't a question of trying to be mindful. Let go of any ideas about whether you are mindful or not. Don't make a problem about mindfulness. Trust yourself. Just trust your ability to relax and open. You don't have to prove anything, to get anything, to control anything, or achieve anything. If those kind of thoughts arise, be aware of them and let them go. If there's a sense of, I've got to get my samadhi together, just let it go. Begin to recognize the natural state of consciousness. It is pure consciousness before you become anybody. There is no self in it. The Buddha called it the gate to the deathless. Mindfulness is the path to the deathless. This is the deathless. You are recognizing Dharma. In other words, deathlessness. Reality is this. Affirm it to yourself. Inform consciousness at this moment in this way. But if you start thinking, I'm enlightened now, just let go of that. It isn't a matter of me anymore, or of I am something, or I am not anything. It's just like this. Learn to affirm that this is the way. This is the path. This awareness. So that your conscious moments are informed with wisdom rather than with perceptions of yourself, of how you see yourself, and your ability or inability to meditate. So awakening is just this. It isn't about getting into high levels of concentration and performing psychic miracles or doing fantastic things. The Buddha didn't praise psychic phenomena such as walking on water or flying in the air, or any of those fantastic abilities that some people might have. He pointed to just ordinary awareness, here and now, to awakened attentiveness to the body, to the mental states, to the emotional states, to the experiences we have through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. And the only way that these things can be put into perspective is through awareness. Because if we're not aware, we just think about life and the mind goes around in circles. Trying to figure everything out intellectually does have some advantages, but it's not liberating because we are caught in the conditioning of the mind. What I'm encouraging you is to recognize and learn the value of awakenedness in yourself instead of endlessly dwelling on your failures, your weaknesses, and seeing yourself from a critical perspective. This is what we tend to do. The personality view often has this very judgmental element to it. And there's no wisdom in the critical mind. The critical faculty doesn't allow wisdom to operate. But the Buddha's teaching is a wisdom teaching. And wisdom is knowing things as they are. It is the discerning faculty. It is the Buddha knowing the Dharma. The Buddha represents pure consciousness in a physical form. It is pure, undiluted consciousness, but within a human form. Okay, so I hope you found that reading insightful and helpful. And if you want to hear more from Ajahn Sumedho, please find him on YouTube. It seems to be the modern phenomenon of communicating the Dharma, and why not? This is where we find ourselves. It's like this. So just in conclusion, I want to wish you all a very happy Christmas and coming up to the new year. It's been probably a very challenging new year for a lot of people in the world, and perhaps for yourselves personally. So if we can think of ourselves and all beings with compassion, but also trusting the process that things are like this, these are unfolding in ways that are new and challenging, but we're all very blessed here to have access to the Dharma to navigate these difficult times. So I also want to say too that if there's been anything here that has been confusing or that you don't agree with or you don't understand, just let it go. Don't hold on to anything that I've said. It's just an offering. The Buddha always said, only when you know for yourself should you accept it. So I just offer these teachings and feedback and questions for reflection. And I'd like to just leave with a short poem from a 14th century hermit monk, Zen monk called Stonehouse. A friend of seclusion arrives at my gate. We greet and pardon our lack of decorum. A white mane gathered in back, a monk's robe worn untied, embers of leaves at the end of the night, howl of a gibbon announcing the dawn, sitting on cushions wrapped in quilts, words forgotten. Finally, we meet. So, happy Christmas, everyone. Be well, be safe. I'll see you on the YouTube thingy. Bye.